I'm your host, Christine Marie, and this conversation today is one that we've never touched on the Knowing Show. We are going to be talking today about how our education system is fundamentally not preparing kids for real world encounters. So by the time they're in their 20s, they're starting to effectively learn how to do financial literacy and what does it mean to lead? What does it mean to actually cultivate emotional intelligence so that at 30, 35, they can actually start living. And so we want to work that timeline backwards and actually allow for our kids when they leave the nest, when they're 18 years old, they actually have what they need to live life well, live life whole, live life healthy. And there is no one I know who is making a better impact than Jay Bhakta. Thank you so much for joining us today. You have an incredible program that is doing this very thing. So I appreciate your time, my friend.
Hi, Christine. Yeah, thanks for having me. I know empowering the next generation is something that you're passionate about through our conversations, and I'm just excited to dive deeper into this topic together.
Yeah. I'm so grateful because, man, Jay, what you're doing, I have this dream and aspiration of turning knowing into focus more so for kids and really bringing it emotional intelligence into education, but you're doing it. You're actually really working with kids and families, and parents are coming to you and you're changing lives right here, right now. And even just reading testimonials on your website, the base case and build, you're really making an impact. So can we first start with, what are the core concerns and questions and problems that are leading parents to even wake up and realize, my kid actually needs this at 7, 10, 15?
So much has changed from, when I was a child and growing up. The environment is completely different. The struggles are different. I mean, it's. I think the kids have a lot more of a challenge now than we had growing up with the whole technology advances, AI technology. I mean, there's just so much uncertainty that the kids have to deal with now. I know when I went through college, university, I knew the degree that I went for, I was going to get a job. You know, um, as the years have progressed, that was like 25 years ago. As the years have progressed, that's less and less likely. I mean, my nephew just graduated from U of A, and he was telling me that 60% of the people that graduated didn't have a job lined up after getting their degree. And I was like, oh wow, and that's something that universities definitely don't want to openly share. But
Yeah.
that one really caught my attention.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, gosh, and with to your point, technology is changing so rapidly and so fast. So what's being taught in the first place, how relevant even is it? And our education system was built by Rockefeller to create industry workers. And
Mm-hmm.
we don't have that world now. So can you talk a little bit, the primary, like, number one, what is chief among them all that parents are coming to you for?
The biggest concern is the kids not showing their full potential. They're having that drive to
Mhm.
excel. I mean, they just kind of see them getting by, and I think that's an ongoing problem with with a lot of the kids that are growing up in this generation, is that they just do the bare minimum. They don't excel. We want our kids to not just grow up and get to where we're at. We want them to stand on our shoulders and do more than what we've done. And a lot of parents don't see that. They don't see that uh, initiative to do things above and beyond more than that's asked of the school system, the activities, everything that they do. And it's really frustrating for a lot of parents. I know that was a frustration of mine as well before I started this program.
Mm, that's so good. And when you talk about reaching their full potential, I love that concept. I've never thought of it. I think today, if I want to reach my full potential, what does that look like for me as an adult? But what does it look like for this little 8-year-old kid to be in the fullest potential of their age right now? Who they were made to be right now, living a full life. How do you help parents and children come to even know that for themselves?
It takes time and patience. A lot of these concepts that we teach, you don't know what's going to give them the aha moment, what's going to, but we teach it in a way that the kids can apply it now in their lives, and it becomes a principle framework that's embedded in them. It becomes part of their operating system that as they get older, they can pull it out of their bag when they need it. A lot of the stuff that we teach, they might not quite get it as far as, okay, how does this apply to me at this point? But you've heard the saying that you never step in the same river twice. So, repetition is the key and consistency is the key, because, the circumstances change, the situations change. Maybe they go from middle school to high school to college, friends change. I mean, there's a lot of things, the activities change, the sports that they're in, their identity changes when they come from high school to college, because maybe they don't play sports anymore. I mean, there's just so many things that change, but the frameworks are always the thing that's there, right? So I think that's the thing with teaching kids at a young age, is that it becomes embedded in them, and not only teaching them, but having conversations with them. So one of the things that I've learned along the way is it's not just about teaching the kids, it's about making it a journey for the family, because the environment is important. If the kids learn something and then they go home to an environment that doesn't support it, then they're less likely to apply it, and it's going to get lost, right? So I've made the program more about the journey for the family. And then, our focus is creating conversations, because I know that I struggled having conversations with my kids, because when I approach them with things that I want to teach them, or, hey, this would be super valuable for you, they're just like, why is dad lecturing me again? Usually in one ear, out the other, and it's really frustrating. So the way I designed the program is just to get kids to not just learn it, but give them questions, like dinner talk questions that they can ask their parents and get their perspective. And then it helps create that common language and comfort level. So then when difficult situations arise in the future, the kids don't go to Google or ChatGPT or some random guy on YouTube blasting that, hey, you should do this. They feel comfortable going to their parents, because they've already built that, over time.
That's so good. And you mentioned, the ability to have conversations. One of the things that I noticed is that you really talk about conflict and helping students understand the dynamics that include 3 particular roles when engaging in conflict, because so often it's the conflict that then lends to feeling misunderstood. And I even saw a study the other day where it was boys at 10 years old, they're notoriously being self-identified as, I am not known. No one knows me. No one understands me. So there's a crisis. We see now at 20s and 30s, all this unhealth manifesting, but it starts at a really young age at fundamentally feeling misunderstood. And often that is derived from moments of conflict and the lack of resolution. So can you talk a little bit about those 3 roles and the conflict dynamic that you really help kids move through?
I mean, the biggest one that we start with, and it's really important and it sounds simple, is just something I learned from Dan Nicholson in the book that he wrote, Rigging the Game, which is playing your game. We tend to go through life changing who we are to kind of fit in with others. Sometimes we feel the pressure, sometimes we feel excluded. But, when I started this program, I started it with a group of kids that were 14 to 16-year-olds. It was a group of 4 kids. And it went really well. I was teaching emotional intelligence lessons every week. They loved it. They were applying it. I was only going to do 1 cohort because it's more of a passion project of mine. But my wife was like, well, you can't forget your 10-year-old daughter. And I was like, well, she's only 10 years old. How much of this can really apply to her? She's like, well, why don't you just ask her about her day? And then I started digging in deeper. I started asking about what she's been experiencing, with her friends in school. And I was like, oh my gosh, she needs this just as much as any other kid, because she's really struggling right now. And so I expanded the ages to 10 and up, and I saw some huge differences in just the confidence that she built in understanding, just like, I don't need to change who I am to try to fit in with others. The right people will come into my circle just being who I am, right? And I think that was a big one for me. That's a big win. Like, hey, this is well worth it. And it just kind of motivated me to keep going and expanding, because I think that's the biggest one. It's just like, it sounds so simple too, like playing your game, but what is your game, and how do situations and circumstances affect your decisions? But if you stay true to who you are, then it helps you make the right decision moving forward.
And then so who you are, so much of what I talk about with knowing is really targeting adults. So I love this angle of talking about the kids and helping them understand who they are at 10 years old. What are some practical questions that you ask them to help them really understand and explore? Because they're going to change. Yet there is this, frankly, for adults, so much of it is return to who you were as a child. So this time is so sacred. How do you really help them explore that?
It's a whole different, it's a lot of different concepts that you kind of throw them, and then it just depends on what feels the right to them, right? I think the biggest one that kids have found that very useful is closer over more, is understanding what is it that they truly want, because most adults don't even define what it is that they truly want,
Yes.
right? And so if you don't define what it is that you truly want, then how do you know you're moving closer to it, or how do you know your decisions that you're making are the right ones? And
Mm,
I think this one really helps the kid because they're in school, they're in activity, sports. There's a lot of things going on in their lives, and maybe they want to be the starting, guard for their basketball team, or they want to be a forward for on their soccer team, or they want to master an instrument. Well, if that's what you want, what are the steps you're taking that's bringing you closer to it, and what are the things that you're doing that's keeping you from it, right? And once they start thinking about this concept in their decisions, then they'll help them move closer to the things that they really value and what they really want in life.
that's so good. And how can parents, I mean, honestly, for parents to be involved in this, I love that you're getting them engaged because if it's just you telling the child, and then the child comes to their parent and says, I think I want this, and then the parent doesn't understand your framework of understanding the value. Hey, them
Mhm.
knowing what they want is actually a core part of them knowing who they are. Because that's
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying in terms of those are kissing cousins, right? Like those are very aligned in terms of knowing what you want lets you understand better to who you are. And so, how do you help the parents? What's the dynamic like? I saw that you've got this workshop coming up in early October, the 6th through the 8th. What
Mhm.
what does that look like? Is it the whole family? Is it the parents, both parents and the child? Like what's the environment like as you kind of help this family dynamic improve?
Yeah, so over time, obviously, I made adjustments from when I first started, and I realized, the big part of the program, because what I do is I'll teach a lesson, I'll give the description, I'll give them real life example scenarios, I'll give them an action plan, but the most important thing that I do at the end of it is I'll give them questions that they could ask their parents. So that way they get their perspective. They don't just get my perspective, but they also get the parent stories and their experiences. So then that once the kids approach the parents with a topic or a question, that usually opens up a floodgates for deeper conversations, and they could throw whatever else they want into the conversation because the floodgates were opened by them, right?
Right.
So what I usually do is with the parents, I'll notify them and let them know, hey, this is a lesson that we're going to be teaching. This is exactly what it is. Be prepared for your kids to come to you with questions so you're not caught off guard. Because if the parents can't make the lesson, or they don't know what the lesson is, and the kids ask them questions, they might be kind of dumbfounded, right?
Yeah.
So the through this whole process, the parents are learning just as much as the kids. In fact, a
Yeah.
lot of the parents are saying that even if their kids weren't enrolled in the program, they will continue on because it's made such a huge difference in their life. And that's the
Wow.
truth, because all these concepts have helped me. I'm just teaching it to kids at an earlier age so that it could help them, and it gets embedded in their operating system growing up.
So good, Jay. Jay, what initially inspired this for you? I mean, this is so important, and yet I've never heard anyone else doing something like this.
I spent 20 years working in the tax industry, and I got to see the emotional and financial behaviors of thousands of people. You know, uh,
Mm,
it really fundamentally shaped my perspective and drove me to do what I'm doing today. A lot of these clients would come in, they would be in some financial stress, they would be counting on these huge refunds from the government to bail them out. And I'm over here thinking that, hey, I'm helping them
yeah.
because I'm the one that's filing their taxes for them. I'm getting these huge refunds, and I'm helping them dig themselves out of a hole and changing the trajectory of their lives. But in reality, they come back the following year, they're stuck in the same pattern and stuck in even maybe in a deeper hole. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, so the no amount of money was going to help them get out of the situation that they're in, because they didn't have the financial literacy and emotional intelligence to get themselves out, and they didn't have the environment to ever believe that they can ever get out of it, right? So I started thinking, I was like, okay, if the money isn't the problem, and because honestly, like this free money that the government gives is designed to keep the, the keep people stuck where they're at. They're designed to give them a taste of a life that they can't sustain, because once they get this money in their hands, they'll go to a restaurant that they normally won't eat at. They'll go to vacations that they normally wouldn't be able to afford and buy, furniture, TV, all the stuff that they normally wouldn't get. And now they got a taste of this lifestyle they can't sustain, and then now they're in deeper holes every year. So over the years, seeing this happen over and over and over again, I'm like, something has to change. And then I realized, I came to the conclusion, as I was rewiring my operating system, going through, masterminds, coaching sessions, learning, thinking about all the mistakes that I made in the past. I was like, how do I teach it to my kids? Because I don't want them to go through the same thing that I went through. And it was I was like, I had to journal about it for, a while, for like 5-6 months. I was journaling. I was like, how do I do this without it coming across a lecture? How do I
Mm,
do it with, so they actually apply it? And I knew that if I just talked directly to my son, who was 14 at the time, and my daughter 10, like it's not going to be effective. So I got a group of kids together. Like if I talk to a group of kids, and I'm not talking directly at my son,
yeah,
then that would be easier. And then he's in an environment with other kids that are learning the same thing, so he's not alone through that process, and that worked out well. I mean, the kids loved it because they were learning things that they didn't learn in school. It was a challenging their way of thinking.
right.
It actually helped them excel in everything that they were doing. And the parents loved it because they're getting these conversations that they've always wanted with their kids. And now they didn't have to work for it. They took that stress off of them to try to initiate those conversations. The kids were initiating it. And it just made their life a lot easier. And it created a connection and common shared language between them. So that's how it started. And then it was initially, it was just a passion project, a hobby project. I didn't have intentions of making it into a full blown, theme program, but word of mouth and referrals started to
Yeah,
spread, and it just kind of grew from there. And I was like, you know what, I'm done with taxes. I think I put my time in for 20 years. It's I need to move on to this, because it's it goes back to what kind of impact are you leaving on your time in this world. And I
yeah,
the tax business, I was not leaving. And when I asked that question to myself, I wasn't leaving the impact that I wanted to. And now
yeah,
I'm able to with this program. And I truly believe that in order to remove suffering, um, why don't you make it so it doesn't happen in the first place? Why wait till the trauma happens and try to
yeah,
spend years and years recovering from it? Get to them early, so then if mistakes are going to happen, right? It's just a part of
mm,
life. But if they have the frameworks and principles and frames, they're able to recover from it much easier than someone that don't have it. They could, someone that doesn't have it will keep making the same mistakes over and over again. Someone that
mm.
have these tools and knowledge in place can recover and get back on path quicker.
Jay, it's so you answered this question, but the connection between financial literacy and emotional intelligence. From what I heard you say, effectively, if we don't know how to manage our finances with almost like an objective view without an emotional element, and being able to think strategically around it and not getting emotionally tied to, oh my gosh, look at this money that I've been given. It's almost the lens through which you view the world is the emotional intelligence, and then the physical manifestation is the ability to handle money.
Yeah.
Is that a
Yeah.
fair way to put it?
Yeah, I mean, when I first started, it was all emotional intelligence lessons. I didn't even have the financial literacy pillar in the program. But some of the
Okay.
kids that were transitioning from high school to college are like, oh, these guys have a huge. I mean, they got emotional intelligence on a high level, but they have no financial literacy skills. They don't
Yeah.
know what the rat race is. They don't know what financial freedom looks like. They don't know how to invest. They don't know how to weigh risk. The barbell strategy and how to
Mm.
balance that. I mean, there's just so many frameworks that these kids didn't have. And I was like, you know what? There needs to be two pillars in this program, because ultimately you could be financially literate and be emotionally wrecked, or you could be
Yeah.
emotionally intelligent and be broke, right?
Yeah.
So I think if when you're strong in both areas, then you're set up to generate true wealth.
So good. It's really true. And true wealth as it pertains beyond just the financials. It's relational equity as well, having wealth in that regard, and your own physical well-being. It's health and wealth in every regard.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful you're doing this. One of my questions I have for you, you mentioned dinner conversations at the beginning. What are some topics and questions that you offer up for families to engage? Because I think everyone could benefit from that. What do I do over mealtime?
Yeah, so the questions change based on the lesson that I teach. So I teach an emotional intelligence lesson every month and a financial
Yeah.
literacy lesson every month. And then based on that topic, for example, it could be books. Maybe it's I don't know if you heard of Go Giver, the 5 laws of
Yeah.
stratospheric success, Think and Grow Rich. It could be concepts that I teach, like the monkey mind brain. It could be emotional, intelligence lessons about empathy. But whatever that lesson is at that time, while it's fresh in the kids' minds,
Yeah.
those questions will be geared towards that. And then usually it's hard for kids, so I'll give them like 5 or 6 questions that they can ask. Like, hey, pick the one that makes sounds easiest for you to ask your parents. And you
Yeah.
don't have to have all these questions. Just pick one that you can say, okay, you know what, this will be something I feel comfortable asking and having a conversation with, and then that could lead to more questions and more conversation after that. But parents, sometimes the kids don't initiate conversations. I do push it during the calls, but sometimes the kids don't. So then I have dinner talk questions that I give the parents. So then the parents can ask questions to the kids about the lesson. And so then if it doesn't come from the kids, then the parents can initiate it in a way that it, starts a conversation.
Yeah. Jay, what's the biggest transformation you're seeing in these kids as they start learning emotional intelligence? Like, how are they changing after, let's say, 7 different lessons with you? What does the manifestation of emotional intelligence look like for these little people?
It's conversations and the way they present themselves. For
Mm,
example, an example lesson that we did for this last emotional intelligence lesson was, would you follow yourself into battle? Like, how do you present yourself when things don't go
wow.
your way? Because in life, things don't go your way, situations happen that are frustration. How do you present yourself? Do you lift people up or do you drag people down? Right. So if you ask this question, maybe it's sports, maybe you're on a sports team, would you follow yourself into battle on your team? If the answer is no, maybe you need to change something about how you're showing up as a leader on your team. If you expect the leaders on the team to work certain and you ask yourself that question and the answer is no, then that's there's something wrong, right? So something that needs to change. So lessons like that really do help the kids think differently, especially because it applies to them and everything that they're doing. Um,
Yeah.
I mean,
Mm,
I see it all the time where people around you just fall apart when things go south. And they just
yeah.
like, it's the end of the world because of the littlest things that might not go their way. And they just because they don't have the emotional intelligence, because they're stuck in their own little bubble, that they don't even see how it's affecting everybody else around them. And,
Yes.
when you get the kids to start thinking this and seeing this second, yeah, in this situation, this happened. I probably, maybe in the spur of the moment, they don't react the way they're supposed to, but at least they could catch themselves. You know what? I wouldn't have followed myself in the battle in that situation. I'm not going
Wow.
to let that happen again. You know?
Mm. What a
So,
good question. Would you follow yourself into battle? I
oh yeah.
love that. So I'm just kind of taking some notes as we're going. The first thing you said was really helping kids know what they want, being
Mhm.
able to not feel the need to fit in and not kind of sacrifice who they are, and recognize that in being true to themselves, they'll attract the right friends. Third, would you follow yourself into battle? I mean, that's huge. And when it comes to you mentioned this, so I want to dig into this a little bit. There is something about the way that we parent and culture in and of itself. We're really creating little people that it's all focused around them. A lot of times kids aren't feeling actually like they're a part of the team, which is devastating for them because they actually need to know that they fit in as a part of the whole rather than they're the star. And so in terms of really helping them train to have an others focused perspective, yet also what do I want? That's a really hard duality to hold. So how do you help them cultivate an awareness for other people and the impact that a decision or their actions could have on other people while also recognizing what do I want?
I mean, a big part of it is empathy. Just
Mm,
the putting yourself in other people's shoes and seeing how that seeing their perspective on how their day's going, because sometimes, like, let's just say a parent yells at you, and then you get frustrated because they're yelling at you. But what really led to that? Put yourself in that person's shoes that led to that person getting, maybe they had a rough day, maybe they had a busy schedule, and they just wanted, what really happened that led to that person to behave that way? And what part did you play in it? Right? And what could you do differently so that maybe you could acknowledge the other person's feelings? Because that's one of the things that often gets overlooked when someone comes at you with anger. Its tendency is to fire back, but the best thing you could do is acknowledge the other person's feelings and say, okay, your feelings are valid. Let's figure out a way to get, what can we do to get past this, right? But what we usually end up doing, we just discount the other person's feelings right off the bat because we really think they're wrong and we're right. And then, that usually ends up to be he said, she said, and just keeps escalating until to a point where it's a full blown war, right?
yes.
But this one, that it's a, that lesson really helped siblings because
Mm,
siblings tend to fight a lot, and it becomes one of those wars all the time between each other. And then when I was like, okay, hey, let's work through some scenario and situations that it doesn't end up being this situation all the time. And I got feedback from parents and even the kids that it's helped their relationship in the sense that, I mean, and they still fight. It's going to happen, but
yeah.
they catch themselves quite a bit, and maybe it's not a full blown war. Maybe they catch it before it ever happens, but there's
Mm,
improvement there, right? The more they practice it, the better they get at it, and it will help them in becoming leaders when they're on a
yes.
project or even in a work environment or business if they're an entrepreneur. All this stuff, all
Yeah.
these skills will help them in communicating and all that too.
Mm. Jay, as we were kind of in the green room before going live, I just, as I was, praying for our conversation and for the people listening and your message and your business, realizing that every single one of these kids, man, they may not know the impact for another 10, 15 years. And so there's something about, okay, there's transformation happening right now where really there's peace in the home. There's even the parents are developing an ability to connect with their kids. So that's incalculable because here's the thing. You're paying a price now for a ramification that you will never experience the pain of and something that you can never undo, where so much it's like, okay, if I'm paying this amount of money to go to the gym and get a coach, I know what's going to happen. But if we're not investing in the cultivation of our kids, we actually don't know the ramification of what our relationship as parents might look like with them if we don't do this. And then when
Yeah,
we know the ramification, it's too late. We can never go back.
yeah, yeah. I
So
mean, that's yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, please.
No, I mean, from what you said, it's spot. I mean, we live. Most people tend to not do anything until their backs to the wall, right?
Yeah.
Until they have no choice to do something about it. Like, for example, when it comes to health and fitness, until the doctor says that you're going to die, you need to go and do this, and then they're going to go do it, right?
Yeah.
And when it comes to kids, they don't see like you were saying, the ramifications down the road. So it's not affecting them now. And then,
Mm,
a lot of the myths that parents have is that, hey, kids will be kids. They'll figure it out. We figured it out. But I don't want to take that. I wouldn't want to chance that in this uncertain environment that we're going to live in. I'd want to give them all the tools that they can possibly have to make the right decisions or feel confident. Because honestly, like, I don't want to retire and then worry about my kids. I want to
right.
retire and just enjoy my retirement. And, I want
Yes.
my kids to know that my kids are well off. They have their head on straight and they're going to make it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know what kind of retirement will be if you're sitting here on the beach and your kids are sitting there struggling emotionally and financially,
Yeah.
because that would take a toll on you,
Wow.
in my opinion. Right. So that's the way I look at it. Like, hey, get them the tools so then I could enjoy my time in the future as well. And, that peace of mind is
Wow.
valuable.
That is such a good perspective. Can we even enjoy the retirement that we're working so hard for if our kids are destitute on an emotional, spiritual, physical, or financial level? It almost doesn't matter. If they're not well in one category, it's hard for us as parents, when we really love them, to be able to really be free. So when
Yeah.
we as parents think about freedom, it's not just financial, it's also empowering our kids with the stable foundation from which they then can build. I love that perspective, Jay. That is so critical. And it's something that we don't ever talk about in terms of a KPI. A key
Yeah.
performance indicator of my life is, are my kids actually set up? Because even if they don't have tons of money and they're not millionaires, but they're truly experiencing joy, and they know they're managing their money well, things like that. I mean, man, they've got the foundation, and then they really can do anything.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that is overlooked because we're always
Yeah.
looking at the dopamine now. We're not looking at the
Yes.
future. We want that gratification. We want that basket that they're making, and we want
Yes.
that excitement now. And then we never look 10, 15 years down the road, which is something that I'm trying to get out there to get the message across and say, hey, think about 10, 15 years from now and where you want to be. Right?
What an
That's a
interesting.
tough ask.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it is. I love that you said the dopamine hit that parents get when their kid makes the basket. So,
Yeah.
how much of how we're encouraging our kids to live a life is actually for our own edification rather than for their own well being? Thinking about it from the future perspective, too. I wish my parents had not let me they hadn't given into my complaining about playing piano. I
Mhm.
wish I had stayed on with lessons, and they could
Yeah.
have made me. I'm so
Yeah.
glad that they put me into a classical education, even
Yeah.
though it wasn't my favorite and it was hard. I look back and I'm so really, I think for all of us, it's okay, to the best of my ability. That's where this question of what's their potential, I think, circling all the way back to that first question of how can parents really chart a course and really understand the potential of their child. It's really kind of visioning something based with very little data. How
Yeah.
can they do that?
Yeah. I mean, I, it's just so many different concepts that you could share with the kids. For example, like the compound effect you're talking about, you wanting to not play the piano anymore because you're frustrated. But you know, initially, in the beginning, it's always going to be this obstacle and this hurdle that you need to jump over, and you're going to get to a point where you want to quit. But you understand the compound effect, you understand that anything that you do in life is that way. But once you get over that hurdle, then that's when the exponential
Mm,
growth happens. So
mm,
if you don't feel that hurdle or obstacle, then you're playing it too safe. Maybe
mhm,
you're not working to excel in what you want to do. Maybe you're just getting by, right? But
mm.
you should look for that hurdle, that obstacle, and like you push through it and say, okay, you know what, the exponential growth is going to happen once I get past this, right?
Yeah. Jay, I'm even thinking to that very analogy. I think as parents, we can ask that question: are we actually experiencing any hurdles with our kids, or are we giving our kids a very happy-go-lucky life? Because if we
Mhm.
are, maybe we're not actually preparing them for the future, and we're not actually serving them. So until we actually hit some resistance with our kids, it's like any good thing. Once we hit the resistance, that's when we know we're getting to the other side of really experiencing growth. So if our kids aren't resisting anything that we're putting in front of them, I think that warrants a look in the mirror.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's surprising to me how many parents will want to put their kids in the program, but they're like, well, I don't want to put in my kids in anything that they don't want to do, right? Without
Yes.
even giving the chance of like, oh, or my kids already have too much on their plate, but without even giving them the opportunity to even experience it, right? Because they
Mm,
have their own false beliefs, they have their own internal beliefs in place that keeps their kids from having that growth. And yeah,
wow.
man, we do live in a society where parents do coddle their kids a little bit, right? Because they're like, oh, I don't want, any kind of, um, you know, fight back or resistance, and we cave, right? Because I'm like, well, that's good. That means there's growth there. That means that there's something happening there that, that's making them better, right? But
Mm,
we sometimes think that as a negative thing, but that's a good thing. We always talk
mm.
about it, right? If you're too comfortable, there's no growth. If you're uncomfortable, then that's the place you want to be, because that's where growth happens, right? And it's just so easy just to avoid that little bit of resistance. You just like, oh, I don't want to deal
Mhm.
with it, or just move on from it. And what can I do to make the kids comfortable, which is not the right thing
Yeah.
to do, honestly, all the time.
Or chasing the KPI being the most popular, my kid loves me, whereas their kid, what are we chasing? The dopamine hit of our kid making a basket, or them boasting to their friends, yeah, I never have to do any chores around the house. My dad's awesome. Whatever it is, what is the actual KPI that we should be chasing? The ideal. And I think that even in thinking about that, what is the ideal for my family? What's the ideal for me as a parent? What's the ideal for my child at 25 years old? And I'm thinking about going back to that example of piano. If my parents had sat down and said, do you like how your mom plays piano for us? On She'll just sit down and she would just play, and it was so peaceful and it was so wonderful, and she could play anything. And if my parents had been like, do you want to be able to do this for your family?
Yeah.
Even at 10 years old, I could have actually made a decision for myself at the time. And then I look back and I'm like, dang it, I chose wrongly or whatever. But really giving the opportunity to help kids say, to your point, the compound effect. By
Yeah.
the way, this is what you could be working towards, and really helping them see the ideal for themselves. Who do you want to be? What skills do you want to have for your family one day? And I think really helping our kids visualize and vision what's possible. You said something that reminded me of a conversation I had actually just yesterday on the Craft and Calling podcast. Someone, Mike Abramowitz, he said, I was teaching my children to survive my childhood rather
Yeah.
than recognizing that they're existing in a very different space and time. So if we as parents are not healed, we're fundamentally inbreeding things in our children, either being reactive to what we wish we had had in childhood, or we're actually just subconsciously repeating old patterns.
Yeah.
So I really think that what you're doing here by having the parents come in and sit alongside the student is absolutely brilliant, Jane. I'm so grateful for what you're doing. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and just so you know, uh, how this whole thing idea came to me was, I was in a group chat, and one of the guys in the chat suggested that, hey, why don't you have your son create an NFT project? And my first thought that came to my mind was that there's no way my son would be able to do it, right? And I just
Mm.
brushed it off. And then there's something that Nick Peterson said in one of his, videos, and he said, like, it's much easier to build strong children than fix broken adults. And I realized, I was like, I'm the problem, because I discounted what my son could do before even giving him the opportunity to do it. And that
Wow.
goes back to us living through, the way we are, and our issues that we're dealing with, are the restrictions that we put on ourselves, obstacles that are in our own heads, we're putting on our kids. And
Mm.
I realized, so that's what initially got me thinking. I was like, okay, second, I'm the problem. How do I fix this? And then that's when I started thinking about this and journaling about it. And, it took months and months and talking to a lot of people. And I was like, okay,
Mm.
that's how the program started, was just having that initial thought that I caught myself making the same mistake that a lot of parents make,
So good. Yeah, Jay, I so appreciate your honesty and your humility, right? Even being able to acknowledge that you're leading by example. So thank you for what you're doing. How can people learn more about you and get involved to support and honestly have their kids come in and be transformed?
Yeah, there's several ways you could just send me a direct message, have a conversation. Emotional intelligence and financial literacy gets thrown around a lot. It's like, what is it? What does it really mean? Until
Yeah.
you actually have a conversation. If you're intrigued and this is something that's, like, interests you, then have a conversation with me about it. I could explain a little bit more. I could show you some of the lessons that we teach, so you have a better understanding about it. Because there's a lot of programs out there, but I could tell you, I'm biased, but this is put my heart and soul into this to make it so that it's result based, right?
Yeah.
We do live virtual sessions. So I have kids from all over the country in the program. And then we have in-person workshops that we do locally. We have an annual event that's coming up for families in November. So we have a lot of cool stuff happening, and we keep adding to the plate. And there's so many people that who doesn't want to build strong kids, right?
Yeah,
I mean, there's so many
exactly.
people that want to work with base case and build, and they want to, they just love what we're doing. So there's and then the families benefit from it because there's just so many people out there that want to contribute and remove suffering before it happens, right?
Yes.
So I've been doing this for 4 or 5 years. Just I could tell you, I've made a lot of adjustments along the way, and it's got to the point where I feel like it's doing what I want it to do. Right? So definitely
I
just
love it.
shoot me a direct message if you want to learn a little more. Check out our website, basecaseandbuild.com. But the best, just set up a call with me and have a conversation. Just I think that's the best way to fully understand what it's all about.
Good, good. Jay, thank you so much for your time today. Y'all, thank you so much for tuning into the Knowing Show. I'm going to drop a couple of links in the chat here, as well as the link to Jay's website. Jay, you've got a webinar coming up, correct, on the October 6th through 8th?
Yeah, I actually have a lesson today and then have a workshop on Saturday. So there's always some webinar or lesson. So if you're interested in anything, just let me know. Yeah.
Wonderful. Jay, thank you again for your time, y'all. I will see you tomorrow.